You going live? It's both out here on fleet. Hey, let me see. Oh, you want to go live today, right? Because your hair on fleet. You ain't want to go live the other day. Huh. Look at that lipstick. We got 4 viewers.
A family is demanding answers after the man accused of killing their loved one takes a plea deal. Police say Kenyatta Jones killed Morgan Bazemore and Alicia Hereford in 2021.
The victims were mother and daughter. The original charge was murder, but Jones has pleaded down to manslaughter. Allison Basil has details on the change.
8 years. That's the price for taking 2 lives in Norfolk, Virginia. A mother and daughter gunned down in a parking lot, and the killer will walk free before the decade ends. How is this justice? When witnesses refuse to testify out of fear, when crucial evidence becomes inadmissible, when a double murder transforms into voluntary manslaughter, who truly pays the price?
Something else needs to be done about this whole system, this whole corruption. You know, how do you shoot 2 people and you walk away with 4 years? You can hit a geese or a dog and get more time. So how do you get just 8 years total for 2 beautiful souls?
Welcome to Shadows of Crime. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button now to join our community of truth seekers, demanding justice for victims whose stories deserve to be told. Tonight we uncover the shocking case of Morgan Bazemore and Alicia Hereford, a 23-year-old daughter and her 52-year-old mother, both gunned down by someone Morgan once trusted, their bodies discovered side by side in an apartment complex parking lot, their futures stolen in seconds. What makes this case particularly haunting isn't just the brutal execution that took place on that March night in 2021, but the devastating irony at its core. Alicia had dedicated her professional life to helping victims of domestic violence, yet in a cruel twist of fate, both she and her daughter would fall victim to the very violence she had worked tirelessly to prevent. As we reconstruct the events at Hunter Square Apartments, we'll reveal how a heated argument escalated into murder, how a mother's protective instinct led her directly into danger, and how justice seemed to slip through the cracks of a flawed system. But this story contains another mystery that puzzled investigators: the discovery of $250,000 cash hidden in Alicia's car, money that would spark a legal battle even as her family mourned her death. Before we continue, I want to ask, have you ever witnessed warning signs of relationship violence in someone close to you? What did you do? Share your experiences in the comments below. Morgan Bazemore was building a promising future at just 23 years old. As a data analyst at Shell Point Mortgage Servicing, she had established herself professionally, demonstrating analytical skills and attention to detail that impressed her colleagues. Friends described her as intelligent and driven, with ambitions that extended far beyond her current position. Her social media profiles painted the picture of a young woman enjoying life: dinner, outings with friends, family gatherings, and the occasional vacation photo, capturing moments of joy that would later become precious memories for those who loved her. Behind Morgan's success stood a mother whose influence shaped her daughter's character and values. Alicia Hereford, 52, had built a career dedicated to helping others navigate life's most dangerous situations. After years in social work, Alicia had risen to manage an emergency shelter program, working directly with victims of domestic violence and families in crisis. Her colleagues at the Samaritan House in Virginia Beach remembered her as passionate and deeply committed to protecting vulnerable individuals. "We were devastated when we heard the news," said Robin Gauthier, executive director of the Samaritan House. "One of our own was murdered and fell victim to domestic violence. It just goes to show that even when you're aware of all the resources and educated on domestic violence, you can still fall prey to it." The bond between Morgan and Alicia transcended the typical mother-daughter relationship. Family members would later describe them as thick as thieves, not just parent and child, but genuine best friends who shared confidences, supported each other's dreams, and navigated life's challenges together. They spoke daily, celebrated achievements together, and served as each other's most trusted advisors. They were very good friends, Morgan's aunt would later tell reporters, her voice breaking with emotion. Best friends. This close relationship extended to their wider family circle. Morgan's brother, Marvin Bazemore Jr., completed their tight-knit family unit. Growing up in a household led by a mother dedicated to social service likely instilled in both siblings a sense of compassion and community responsibility that shaped their worldviews. What makes this story particularly tragic is the professional expertise that couldn't prevent personal tragedy. Alicia had spent years helping domestic violence victims escape dangerous situations. She knew the warning signs, understood the escalation patterns, and had guided countless women toward safety and new beginnings. She recognized the red flags that preceded violence and taught others how to protect themselves. Yet somehow, when those same warning signs appeared in her daughter's relationship, they went unaddressed. Perhaps they were subtle. Perhaps Morgan, like many young women, downplayed concerns or believed she could handle the situation. Perhaps Alicia, despite her professional training, found herself caught in that most human of dilemmas. The inability to see clearly when emotions and family ties cloud professional judgment. Whatever the reason, the woman who had saved so many others from domestic violence would ultimately rush headlong into danger when her daughter called for help. The professional knowledge that had guided Alicia throughout her career couldn't protect her on that fatal night when theory collided with the desperate reality of a mother trying to save her child. And as we'll soon discover, that maternal instinct would lead both women directly into the path of a killer. Kenyatta Jones entered Morgan Bazemore's life with the same promise that many relationships begin with: potential, connection, and hope. At 28, Jones was 5 years older than Morgan, living with his mother at Hunter's Square Apartments in Norfolk. Court documents would later describe their relationship as on and off, a phrase that often masks the complex reality of a troubled connection. What exactly on and off meant in their case remains unclear. Did they break up and reconcile repeatedly? Were there previous incidents that caused temporary separations? Did friends or family express concerns? These questions linger unanswered, but patterns in domestic violence cases suggest that such fluctuating relationships often contain warning signs that escalate over time. Prosecutors would later state that Jones and Morgan had been involved for years, suggesting a history deep enough to create powerful emotional ties, the kind that make walking away increasingly difficult with each reconciliation. Like many couples in volatile relationships, they likely experienced periods of harmony that made the troubling moments seem like anomalies rather than indicators of a dangerous pattern. What makes this case particularly striking is the professional context surrounding it. While Morgan navigated her relationship with Jones, her mother, Alicia, spent her days helping other women escape similar situations. At the Samaritan House, Alicia managed emergency shelter programs specifically designed for domestic violence victims. She understood the cycle of abuse, recognized the warning signs, and knew how quickly situations could turn deadly. It just goes to show that even when you're aware of all the resources and educated on domestic violence, you can still fall prey to it. Robin Gauthier from the Samaritan House would later observe, highlighting the cruel irony that defined this tragedy. Did Alicia see concerning behaviors in Jones? Did she counsel her daughter about the relationship? Did Morgan share her fears with the person who would have been most equipped to help her? We may never know these intimate details. But what we do know is that on March 11, 2021, something happened that frightened Morgan enough to make that desperate call to her mother. The exact content of that midnight conversation remains private, but its urgency was clear. Morgan needed help, and she turned to the person she trusted most. Whatever she said prompted Alicia to immediately get in her car and drive to Hunter's Square Apartments. A decision that speaks volumes about the perceived danger of the situation. This moment, a daughter's desperate call and a mother's immediate response, represents the pivotal turning point in our story. Two women who loved each other deeply, one reaching out in fear, the other rushing toward danger without hesitation. the professional becoming personal in the most devastating way possible. I want to pause here and ask you, our viewers, have you ever noticed warning signs in a friend or family member's relationship but felt unsure about how to address them? What stopped you from speaking up? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your insight might help someone else recognize when to intervene. As Alicia drove through the Norfolk night toward her daughter, she couldn't have known she was heading toward a confrontation that would end both their lives. She couldn't have known that her car contained $250,000 in cash that would later become the subject of legal battles. She was simply a mother, responding to her child's need. The most natural instinct in the world. What awaited her at Hunter's Square Apartments was a situation already primed for violence. Jones was agitated, Morgan was frightened, and when Alicia arrived, the dynamic shifted in ways that would prove fatal. 3 people, a heated argument, and a gun. Elements that would combine in the worst possible way in those early morning hours of March 12, 2021. The confrontation that followed would be captured by a witness's dash camera, silent footage documenting the final moments of 2 women's lives and the actions that would send a man to prison. March 11, 2021 began as a typical Thursday in Norfolk, Virginia. The weather was mild for early spring, with temperatures in the low 60s as evening approached. For Morgan Bazemore, it was a workday like any other, analyzing data at Shell Point Mortgage Servicing, perhaps making weekend plans, living the life of a young professional with her future stretching before her. For Kenyatta Jones, we know less about how the day unfolded. What activities filled his hours, what interactions he had, what might have triggered the volatility that would later erupt, these details remain obscured. What we do know is that by nightfall, something had shifted dramatically in the dynamic between him and Morgan. As Thursday evening gave way to night, the situation between Morgan and Jones deteriorated. What began as tension escalated into something that frightened Morgan enough to reach for her phone shortly before midnight. The call she made would set in motion a chain of events that would end with 2 women dead and a community shaken. When Morgan's desperate call reached Alicia Hereford, the mother didn't hesitate. Despite the late hour, despite potential danger, despite everything her professional experience might have warned her about, Alicia got into her car. The same car that mysteriously contained $250,000 in cash and drove toward Hunter Square Apartments on Gough Street. The clock ticked past midnight as Alicia navigated the Norfolk streets, marking the transition to March 12. What thoughts raced through her mind during that drive? Was she formulating a plan to de-escalate the situation? Was she preparing to help Morgan pack her belongings and leave? Was she simply focused on reaching her daughter as quickly as possible? Whatever her intentions, they were rooted in protection and love. Alicia arrived at Hunter Square Apartments shortly after midnight. The parking lot was mostly quiet, with most residents asleep behind drawn curtains. She located Morgan, but they weren't alone for long. Kenyatta Jones appeared, and what began as a conversation quickly escalated into an argument. A witness who later testified in court described hearing raised voices in the parking lot. Another resident returning home with her daughter pulled into the same parking lot at approximately 12:15 a.m. This timing would prove crucial, as the woman's dashboard camera was recording, silently documenting the tragedy about to unfold. The argument between Morgan, Alicia, and Jones grew increasingly heated. Voices raised, gestures became more animated. Tensions that had been building for unknown periods suddenly converged in that parking lot confrontation. 3 people locked in a moment that would define and end their lives in different ways. Then came the sound that shattered the night: gunshots. The dashboard camera captured the horrifying sequence that followed. Jones, in a moment of rage, pulled out a gun and opened fire. Morgan was shot twice, once in the temple and once in her finger, suggesting she may have raised her hand in a futile attempt to protect herself. Alicia was shot 3 times, in her back and chest, possibly as she tried to shield her daughter or perhaps as she turned to flee. The witness with the dashboard camera described seeing 2 people fleeing the scene on foot and a white car driving away. In the confusion of the moment, she initially thought she had seen 3 men before approaching the victims and discovering they were women. She checked for pulses, but found none. Morgan and Alicia lay dead in the parking lot. Their lives ended just feet from each other. Police would later find several shell casings close and around the women's bodies. The medical examiner's report would confirm the brutal efficiency of the attack. Morgan's head wound was immediately fatal, while Alicia's multiple gunshot wounds left her no chance of survival. As Jones fled the scene, the witness called 911. Police responded quickly, but there was nothing to be done for Morgan and Alicia. Their lives had ended together just as they had lived. Mother and daughter, best friends, now victims of the very violence Alicia had spent her career fighting against.
Norfolk police say they responded to a shooting at Hunter Square Apartments on March 12, 2021, and found 23-year-old Morgan Bazemore and her mother, 52-year-old Alicia Herford, shot to death in the parking lot.
Forever in our hearts.
Investigators later arrested Kenyatta Jones. Prosecutors charged him with 2 counts of second-degree murder and gun charges. They say Bazemore and Jones had an on-off relationship.
What makes this case particularly troubling is what happened next with the witnesses. Despite capturing crucial evidence, despite identifying Jones, despite initially cooperating with police, the witnesses would later refuse to testify. Fear of retaliation silenced them, creating a devastating gap in the prosecution's case. We believe it was fear based on what little bit we did get, a prosecutor would later tell the court, highlighting a problem that plagues many domestic violence and murder cases: witness intimidation. This reluctance would ultimately reshape the entire case against Kenyatta Jones, transforming what seemed like a straightforward murder prosecution into something far more complicated. And for Morgan and Alicia's family, it would add another layer of pain to an already unbearable loss. The physical evidence told a story of sudden, explosive violence. Shell casings scattered near and around the victims' bodies indicated multiple shots fired at close range. There were no signs of prolonged struggle. This wasn't a fight that gradually escalated, it was a rapid eruption of deadly force. The medical examiner's findings revealed the brutal precision of the attack. Morgan had been shot twice, once in the temple, a wound that would have been instantly fatal, and once in her finger. This second wound suggested a defensive posture, her hand perhaps raised in a futile attempt to shield herself from the gunfire. Alicia suffered even more extensive injuries, with 3 gunshot wounds to her back and chest. The positioning of these wounds hinted at the possibility that she may have been turning away or attempting to shield her daughter when the shots were fired. As investigators processed the scene, they made a discovery that added another layer of mystery to the case. Inside Alicia's car, parked nearby, they found $250,000 in cash, along with $2,100 in counterfeit bills. This substantial sum, hidden in the vehicle of a social worker, raised immediate questions. Was it connected to the murders? Was it savings? Was it related to some unknown activity? This money would later become the center of a legal battle between family members and city officials, even as the criminal case proceeded. Perhaps the most crucial piece of evidence came not from police work but from coincidence. A resident returning home with her daughter had pulled into the parking lot around the time of the shooting. Her car's dashboard camera had captured video of the incident, silent footage showing 2 people fleeing on foot and a white car driving away. This witness initially told police she thought she had seen 3 men before approaching and discovering the victims were women. More significantly, she claimed to recognize Jones, saying she had known him since childhood through family connections. This identification, combined with the video evidence, should have formed the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. But there was a problem. Despite this seemingly solid evidence, the witness later refused to testify in court. Without her testimony, the dashboard camera footage became inadmissible, a critical piece of evidence rendered useless by witness fear. Other potential witnesses similarly declined to cooperate, creating a devastating gap in the prosecution's case. Meanwhile, Kenyatta Jones had fled the scene. Norfolk police launched a manhunt, and the U.S. Marshals offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to his capture. For 4 days, Jones remained at large, potentially destroying evidence or creating an alibi. Then, on March 16, he turned himself in to authorities. The physical evidence against Jones seemed substantial. The dashboard camera footage, witness identification, and the circumstances of the shooting all pointed to his guilt. Yet without witnesses willing to testify, prosecutors faced a dilemma. The evidence they had gathered, compelling as it was, might not be enough to secure a conviction at trial. This gap between what investigators knew and what they could prove in court would ultimately shape the entire trajectory of the case, leading to decisions that would leave the victim's family feeling betrayed by the very system they expected to deliver justice. And as the criminal case proceeded, the mysterious $250,000 remained in police custody, a silent reminder of questions that might never be fully answered. Following his surrender on March 16, 2021, Kenyatta Jones faced serious charges. 2 counts of second-degree murder, plus additional weapons charges. The case appeared straightforward, a double homicide with dashboard camera evidence and witness identification. The Norfolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office moved forward with confidence, building what they believed was a solid case against the man who had gunned down Morgan Bazemore and Alicia Hereford. For the victim's family, the initial charges brought a measure of relief. They anticipated justice, a trial that would hold Jones fully accountable for taking 2 precious lives. Morgan's aunt later recalled, "We were expecting a big sentence. We have all been waiting and anticipating, trying to leave it in the hands of justice." Prosecutors initially suggested Jones could face up to 30 years in prison. This potential sentence aligned with the family's sense of justice, a lengthy incarceration that would reflect the magnitude of the loss they had suffered. They prepared themselves for the emotional ordeal of a trial, ready to confront the man who had destroyed their family. But as the case progressed toward trial, a critical problem emerged. The witnesses who had initially cooperated with police began to withdraw their participation. The woman with the dashboard camera footage, despite having identified Jones, refused to testify. Other potential witnesses similarly declined to appear in court. "We believe it was fear based on what little bit we did get," a prosecutor would later explain. Without witness testimony, much of the evidence gathered became inadmissible in court. The dashboard camera footage, perhaps the most compelling evidence, couldn't be presented without the witness to authenticate it. The prosecution's case began to crumble. Let's pause here to consider what this moment meant for Morgan and Alicia's family. They had lost 2 beloved women in a senseless act of violence. They had cooperated with investigators, provided statements, identified remains, planned funerals, and grieved publicly. They had placed their faith in the criminal justice system, believing it would deliver appropriate consequences. Now, that system appeared to be failing them. As the trial date approached in March 2023, 2 years after the murders, Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney Ramin Fatehi faced a difficult decision. With key witnesses refusing to testify and crucial evidence inadmissible, the likelihood of securing a conviction on second-degree murder charges had diminished significantly. Jones's defense team had indicated they would claim self-defense, suggesting one of the victims carried a gun, a claim that would be difficult to disprove without witness testimony. Fatehi made the decision that would forever alter the course of justice in this case. He offered Jones a plea deal. Instead of facing trial for second-degree murder, Jones would plead guilty to 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter. The maximum sentence would be just 8 years of active prison time. On March 14, 2023, just days before jury selection was set to begin, Jones accepted the plea deal. The man who had shot Morgan in the head and Alicia multiple times would not face a murder conviction. Instead, he admitted to the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter, essentially acknowledging he had killed in the heat of passion rather than with malice. When Jones appeared for sentencing on July 14, 2023, Norfolk Circuit Court Judge David W. Linetti imposed the agreed-upon sentence, 10 years on each count of voluntary manslaughter, with all but 8 years suspended. Jones would also need to complete 8 years of good behavior and an undetermined probationary period after release. With credit for time served while awaiting trial, his actual time behind bars would be even less. The courtroom that day became a scene of raw emotion and outrage. Family members who had waited more than 2 years for justice felt betrayed by the outcome. Monica Bazemore, Morgan's aunt, addressed the court with barely contained fury. "There are criminals who get more time for drugs. They didn't deserve that. Neither do they deserve the 8-year sentence for that monster." Harvey Hereford, Alicia's husband and Morgan's father, expressed his sense of betrayal. "She served all the way up to her death. The Commonwealth that she served made no effort to prosecute her murder." Even Jones's demeanor during sentencing added to the family's pain. He sat slouched throughout the hearing, appearing disengaged from the emotional statements directed at him. When given the opportunity to speak, he offered just 2 words: "No, sir." Commonwealth's attorney Fatehi defended the plea deal as the only viable option. "I had no choice but to authorize a plea that guaranteed that Mr. Jones would go to prison for homicide. The alternative in this case was not a longer sentence. It was very likely to be a dismissal for lack of evidence." For the family of Morgan and Alicia, these explanations offered little comfort. In their eyes, the system had failed to deliver justice for 2 women whose lives had been callously ended in a parking lot on a March night. News of Jones's 8-year sentence rippled through Norfolk, generating shock and dismay far beyond the Bazemore-Hereford family. Community advocates who had followed the case expressed outrage at what many viewed as a grossly inadequate punishment for taking 2 lives. Local domestic violence organizations pointed to the case as evidence of systemic failures in protecting victims and delivering justice. Robin Gauthier from the Samaritan House spoke publicly about the devastating irony. "It's intolerable that domestic violence is still occurring. One of our own was murdered and fell victim to domestic violence." The case highlighted disturbing statistics. Approximately 30% of all homicides are related to domestic violence, with women of color disproportionately affected. Commonwealth attorney Ramin Fatehi used the case to advocate for change, calling for the establishment of a witness protection program in Virginia. "Cases like these are why we need a witness protection program," he stated. "My thoughts remain with the victims' families as they work through this difficult time." His office emphasized that without witness cooperation, even the strongest evidence becomes unusable in court. While the criminal case concluded with what many considered an unsatisfying resolution, another legal battle was just beginning: the fight over the $250,000 found in Alicia Hereford's car. This substantial sum, discovered by police while processing the crime scene, raised questions that added another layer of complexity to an already tragic story. Norfolk police had kept the money in their evidence unit while the murder case was pending. After Jones's sentencing, both Marvin Bazemore Jr., Morgan's brother and Alicia's son, and Harvey Hereford, Alicia's husband, filed claims for the money. The city of Norfolk asked a judge to determine the rightful owner, initiating a legal process that would continue long after the criminal case had concluded. In March 2025, nearly 4 years after the murders, a court finally ruled that the money would go to Marvin Bazemore Jr., Alicia's only surviving child. In a strange twist, Bazemore wasn't present for this ruling because he had been jailed earlier that week on multiple drug and weapons charges, another tragic turn for a family already devastated by violence. The origin of the $250,000 remains unexplained. Was it savings, insurance money, connected to some unknown activity? This mystery persists, a footnote to the larger tragedy of 2 lives cut short. Looking at this case through a psychological lens reveals patterns common in domestic violence homicides. Research shows that such killings rarely occur without warning signs. The escalation from verbal arguments to physical violence to lethal force typically follows recognizable patterns. When a third party intervenes, as Alicia did for her daughter, the risk of violence often increases dramatically. The perpetrator, feeling challenged or cornered, may lash out with even greater force. I want to hear from you now. What do you think about the 8-year sentence Jones received for killing 2 people? Does our justice system adequately address domestic violence homicides? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters in this important conversation. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about justice, witness protection, and the true cost of domestic violence. For every headline-making case like Morgan and Alicia's, countless others suffer in silence, trapped in dangerous situations with limited options for escape. Their story serves as both a warning and a call to action, a reminder that intervention must come before violence escalates to its deadly conclusion. The deaths of Morgan Bazemore and Alicia Hereford represent far more than an isolated tragedy. They exist within a disturbing pattern of domestic violence homicides that claims thousands of lives each year. According to national statistics, approximately 30% of all homicides against women are committed by intimate partners. Every day in America, an average of 3 women are killed by current or former romantic partners. These numbers aren't just statistics. Their lives cut short, families shattered, communities wounded. And as this case painfully demonstrates, even those with professional knowledge of domestic violence can become victims. What makes these deaths particularly devastating is their preventability. Domestic violence homicides rarely occur without warning. Research has identified clear patterns and warning signs that precede lethal violence. Controlling behaviors are often the first red flag. Monitoring phone calls, dictating friendships, making excessive demands about whereabouts. Isolation follows as victims are gradually separated from support networks that might recognize danger or offer escape routes. Verbal abuse escalates to threats, then to physical intimidation, and finally to violence that increases in severity over time. The most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship often comes when the victim attempts to leave. This separation represents a loss of control for the abuser, a trigger that can prompt lethal violence. When Morgan called her mother that night, she may have been planning to leave Jones, unknowingly entering this high-risk period. What preventative measures might have changed the outcome for Morgan and Alicia? Several critical interventions have proven effective in similar cases. Safety planning is essential, having predetermined escape routes, emergency contacts, and secure locations to flee to when violence threatens. Legal protections like restraining orders, while imperfect, create documentation and consequences for escalating behaviors. Community support systems that offer emergency housing, financial assistance, and emotional support make leaving possible when it otherwise wouldn't be. Perhaps most importantly, witness protection programs, the very resource Commonwealth Attorney Fatehi advocated for after this case, might have allowed witnesses to testify without fear, potentially securing a more substantial sentence for Jones. The thematic message at the heart of this tragedy is clear. Intervention cannot wait until violence has already occurred. The time to act is at the first sign of controlling behavior, the first verbal assault, the first threat. For victims, this means reaching out before physical violence begins. For friends and family, it means recognizing warning signs and offering support without judgment. For communities, it means funding resources that make escape possible. Morgan and Alicia's legacy extends beyond their tragic deaths. Through their story, we're reminded of the courage it takes to intervene in domestic violence situations, both as victims seeking help and as loved ones offering support. Alicia's final act was one of maternal protection, rushing to her daughter's aid despite potential danger. Her professional life had been dedicated to helping others escape violence, and her final moments were spent attempting to do the same for her daughter. Perhaps the most fitting tribute to their memory is to learn from this tragedy, to recognize warning signs in our own relationships and those of people we care about, to speak up when we see concerning behaviors, and to support those attempting to leave dangerous situations. The battle over the $250,000 found in Alicia's car may remain a mystery, but the value of the lives lost that night is beyond measure. 2 women, a mother and daughter, both beloved, both with futures ahead of them, were taken in an act of violence that rippled outward, affecting family, friends, and an entire community. Before we end today's episode, I want to ask you to take 3 simple actions that can make a difference. Like this video to help others find this important information, share it with someone who might benefit from understanding these warning signs, and subscribe to Shadows of Crime for more content that shines light on cases that deserve attention. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, remember that help is available. National hotlines offer 24/7 support, local shelters provide emergency housing, and community organizations can help with safety planning. No one should face domestic violence alone, and intervention before tragedy strikes can save lives. Morgan Bazemore and Alicia Hereford deserved better than their tragic end in that parking lot. By learning from their story, perhaps we can prevent similar tragedies and ensure their deaths were not entirely in vain. Thank you for joining me on Shadows of Crime. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, speaking up can save lives.